Hey everybody, welcome to Stu's Brews, where I'm going to be discussing coffee very, very reluctantly because it's honestly one of those hobbies that's so douchey. You know, as a matter of fact, I've thought of an insult the other day, and it's not directed towards anybody, and it's not directed towards people of one of those pretentious hobbies. It's just something that I want to, right out of the gate, diffuse this episode with. You fuck like you have a case of the walking farts. There you go. Now you have this in your arsenal next time somebody upsets you. Now that the two people who actually listen to this have turned off the podcast, I can sort of start relatively simple talking about coffee. So the problem you run into, like most hobbies or passions, is you can very quickly reach that point of diminishing returns. Diminishing returns is when you start getting less of a percentage of improvement based on how much money or time or energy you're putting into something. So, the two biggest improvements that you can make right out of the gate with coffee is going to be A, the actual coffee you're using, and B, your water. I'm just going to start simple here and we can sort of discuss that. So, a huge step that you can take in your coffee is switching from ground to whole beans. The problem you run into with that is with whole beans, you need a grinder. And with grinders, depending on how deep you are into this, they can get ungodly expensive. Now, a little bit into my journey with coffee, and the backstory here is for years growing up, I would make entire pots of coffee and just drink them in 30 minutes. You know, it was purely for medicinal reasons, which if you're drinking coffee for medicinal reasons, that's an entirely different thing, and this really isn't for you unless you want to start getting better coffee. And I drink whatever store brands were available, pre-ground, Folgers, the off brands, yada yada. And Cafe Bastillo, the espresso stuff, I would just make that extremely strong and not measure anything out. It was just filling the filter, filling the pot, just as much as I could possibly get. And, coffee shops became popular. Local coffee shops, not just like Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks and all that. But, I would try a bunch of those, and some of those I really enjoyed. But one year for Christmas, my ex-wife had got me one of those holy shit, does everything, does your taxes, cuts your grass, sends your grandma a Christmas card type coffee makers. It was Ninja, and good lord, I will say that was a piece of shit. It didn't last very long at all, and it was like a $200 just turd. Do not avoid Ninja at all costs. I've had nothing but bad luck with Ninja. But she got me one of those and a bag of coffee with it, and unbeknownst to her, she mistakenly purchased whole bean. So at that point, we were living with my in-laws, and I happened to just ask if they had a grinder. And they had this old Black & Decker grinder that they don't even make anymore. And I'm not even 100% sure if the purpose was for coffee, but it had a grind size dial on it, and I used that thing for years and years. And that was a huge improvement. One of the biggest, if not the biggest, was going from ground to whole bean. Now, if you've just bought a bag of whole bean coffee or mistakenly at the store purchased one and are too lazy to return a bag of whole bean coffee, as long as you can find a burr grinder to start with, that's going to be just a good starting point without having to do a bunch of research. And if you're just wanting the goal of having your coffee ground, I would suggest going with burr over blade if possible. Now, if you got to do blade, that's fine. You know, if you're not looking to turn this into a financial black hole and ruining your fucking life, by all means, start there. But if you do get a cheaper grinder, I will recommend that you go on Amazon and get a sifter. I believe the one that I still use now is from WatchGet, because essentially especially with burr grinders, if it's a cheaper one, when it's grinding, it produces a lot of fines. What fines are is essentially this powder that comes from the essentially uneven grinding. And if you sift those out, it's going to make a world of difference. And I think the sifter is like $13, maybe 15. So if you're going to use a cheap grinder, that is one little upgrade that I will recommend. At that point, you're probably getting out, you're trying coffees and finding out what you like. I know locally, Huge and Brash was really good. I think Huge is the roastery and Brash is the coffee shop, if I remember correctly. And that was the first place I'd ever went into. And they were selling bags of coffee, and there was a date on it. And I thought that it was expired because it was like a couple of days before. But no, that was the roast date. It had a born-on date. And that was the first time I'd ever seen that, and it blew my fucking mind. And they're like, yeah, you should wait a couple of days before you brew this because it's got to gas off a little bit. And I'd never heard any of this, and it was really fascinating to me. I think Pete's is a store brand that their whole bean has a born-on date on it. So if you're looking to just go to the grocery store and get something fresher, whole, that would be a good option as Pete's. But from there, that was another game changer for me, is how fresh that was. And I loved that for, years. And the game changer was when I met someone who was a fucking psychopath. And this is being said in a good way, but they roasted their own beans. Their brew methods were very meticulous, and a lot of things changed from there. Having coffee that fresh and watching them roast and watching the process was just really interesting to me, and also tasting the results of that, it just... Sometimes you experience something so good that it will ruin the thing for you for life, and this just ruined coffee for me. And at that point, I wanted a roaster, And they pointed out that a cup of coffee is mostly water. So, improving your water is going to be your next step into improving your cup of coffee. However you brew it. Water is extremely important. And I know that if you're listening to this, you probably live in Georgia where the tap water tastes like Kathleen Kennedy's asshole. And it's not even good on its own, let alone for doing anything. Like, it's awful. So, there's a couple of ways that you can go about this, depending on how much work you're wanting to put in. And I did some research here. The recommended pH balance for coffees is between 6.5 and 7.5. Now, if you want to go cheap bottled water, Kroger seems to be a good option. Also, within that range, Smart Water is 6.5, Arrowhead is 6.8, Crystal Geyser is 6.9, which, God, that sounds like a bad 2006 porn star. Welcome, Crystal Geyser, alongside with Evan Stone. Wow, just dropped some knowledge there. Voss Spring Water is 6.92. Fiji is 6.95. Evian is 6.98. Life Water is 7. Ardo Life Water is 7.18. Evian is 7.2. Poland Springs is 7.2. Happy Water is 7.25. Nestle Pure Life is 7.3, which I know that one is the one that most people are probably going to have. Core is 7.4. Volvic is 7.5. Flow Water is 7.57. So there's a bunch of options for you right there that you can just get and use that for your brewing instead of just tap water, because tap water sucks. Another option is you can get distilled water in gallons and get packets off Amazon and remineralize your coffee. It's a little more expensive. Now, you can also do this with Epsom salt and baking soda. There's a ton of recipes online to do so, but it is a lot of work. It is a lot of calculations, yada yada. So they do make what I use. Third Wave is a huge company that makes the packets that you take your bicarb and your hardness and you mix them together. And I use something that's just called coffee water. It is $19.95 for enough packets to make 25 gallons. That will last you a while. Plus, you have to factor in the cost of your gallons of water, which are roughly these days $1.50-ish for a gallon of distilled water. So that's just something else you can use to improve your coffee. Now, from there, if you don't want to use your, coffee maker, your, standard household coffee maker, there's a slew of brew methods, which I'll try and keep this relatively simple for the sake of this first episode and kind of maybe try and devote more into the brewing side of things. So once I got my water, I started doing things like French press and mocha pot, which mocha pot, I personally had a very hard time with the mocha pot. Some people love it. If that's what you use and you love and it's good, then that's fine. Because all this data and science and sort of methodical madness. As long as it tastes good to you, that's all that matters. I know that there's people doing a bunch of research on coffee because coffee, like anything cooking, and that is one fascinating thing that sort of dawned on me when I went down this rabbit hole, is it's all chemistry. So coffee is chemistry. Anything you cook is chemical reactions happening. And knowing what to prolong and what to speed through, it teaches you a lot about the science of cooking. But there's a ton of research, in the community of coffee, because at this point there's scientific research into everything, which is a good thing. But I know there's a ton of arguing about extractions and blah, 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 and grind size and grinders and arguments. And then you get into watching people reviewing grinders and gear, which I am very big on the fact that most reviews are just paid advertisement to get you to spend money on whatever they're affiliated with. And it doesn't matter what any of these people say or what I say. I mean, if you brew Folgers in a used condom and that is fine for you, then do it, So do what tastes best to you. But I know, back to my point, I had bad luck with a mocha pot. I struggled with it. Then I went on to French press, started watching people like James Hoffman. I enjoyed his French press recipe a lot, which I will get into brewing methods on a different episodes. And then I used a pour over. I used like a V60 type thing, which requires buying more fucking shit, because God, gets expensive. But I won't talk so much about the roasting side today, because I do roast, and that's an entirely different topic on its own. But if you want to just improve your coffee out of the gate, get better coffee, get better water, and start weighing things as well. So get a coffee scale, or just a kitchen scale. If you're, just starting out, go to Walmart, buy a kitchen scale. Track and time your results as well. So the recommended sort of ratio of coffee to water is about 16 to, I believe it's about 16, 15 to 17 to 1. Now, there's websites that do the math for you. You don't have to have, an education in arithmetic, because I'm from the 30s, to do this stuff anymore. You can type in how much water you have, and it tells you how many grams of coffee to use. And I know that it seems like a lot of work for that, but the good thing about weighing everything out every time is at least you get consistent results. It's not kind of all over the place. What went right or wrong, and you can kind of start to learn to what to adjust, and you get consistent results every time. So if you're looking to get into this, have a way to brew. Obviously, there's your standard coffee maker, which you probably have. Upgrade your coffee, upgrade your water. If you want to get a little better than that, I would recommend getting a French press. They're pretty cheap, about $20 for a French press, a kitchen scale or a coffee scale. Amazon has options of every fucking thing. Walmart has options for that. And just kind of go from there. Try local coffees, find out what you like. But this is just kind of the introduction of how to initially make coffee a little better. I could go much, much deeper into this, but for the sake of an introductory type thing of what this is going to be covering, I think that's a good starting point of recommendations to get better coffee. And some of it won't really break the bank. Like, there's some initial startup costs there. If you buy whole coffee, you have to buy a grinder, but that's kind of a one-time purchase for a while. Bottled water, I think most people these days are sick of tap water, so they tend to stick to bottled water anyway. I gave a list of recommendations, but really, whatever you have is going to taste better than what comes out of your rusty copper pipes. And those are just a couple of cheap upgrades, and just sort of enjoy the simplicity of it until you get tired of that, because you can go down the rabbit hole very deeply. And I miss when I enjoyed just everything without being a dick about everything. So enjoy it while it lasts, and then as soon as you get sick of it, go to the next thing and the next thing. But yeah, there is my sort of beginner's recommendations for better coffee. And I'll do more in depth episodes as time goes on. But until then, everybody keep sipping, everybody keep shitting, and have a good week.